listening to episode 287 of Mitolife Radio. I'm Matt Blackburn, and today I'm interviewing Morgan Bierschenk from Geoship. Ever since I got into health, I looked at feng shui, and I would always think about how we're always in boxes, whether in a work environment or at home. We're always in this box shape. And so that pushed me into pyramids and pyramid energy and working with that shape, both above my bed, and I used to actually meditate in one. And those were the ones made by the late Nick Edwards that wrote a book on pyramids. And he had a company where he used to sell basically gold-plated arrow shafts, but in a very particular angle that would basically harness etheric energy inside of it. And to me, it was really tangible. And recently, I've been getting more into the shape of the geodesic dome, which Morgan will be talking about in this interview. Over the last few years, I've had several geodesic domes from the company Growing Spaces out of Colorado. They sell polycarbonate and wood-based greenhouses that have a really interesting integrated design to basically maximize food production and make it very energy efficient and also very resilient to the elements, whether you're in a place that has really intense high winds or, like where I live, very heavy snow loads. And in those scenarios and several others, the shape of the dome is far superior to your standard cabin, or in the context of a greenhouse, your standard rectangular greenhouse with a sloped roof. So Morgan with Geoship is taking it to a whole nother level. Instead of just gardening inside of a dome or going inside one intermittently, he created a company and a vision of actually living inside geodesic dome. And there's several companies around the world. Before I was set on Geoship, I researched a lot of them, and they all tend to be very expensive because I was looking into doing that on my property, and they don't look that good. There's a lot of metal, a lot of wood, and even just the panels don't look nearly as good as the ceramic material aesthetically. So in this show, he talks about the ceramic composite that they're using that took 12 years to develop, that allows air exchange, that has resiliency to wildfires, that has a really cool energetic effect, which I go into with him and talk about the differences between the energetic properties of the geodesic dome versus a pyramid. We talk about the affordability of it and how it's essentially the future of sustainable, affordable housing. So I'm really excited to see their domes go up all over the world. I'll be the first one in Idaho to have one above my underground bunker. So it's going to be a really interesting setup that hopefully will be completed by 2026. So enjoy the show. Here is Morgan Bierschenk. All right, we're here with Morgan Bierschenk. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Excited to dive in with you.
Yeah, I tend to focus on vitamins and minerals and enzymatic reactions and a lot of human health focused things, but there's been more talk of mold toxicity, and I've lived in so many different types of homes. I mean, I was raised in the standard house that we were all raised in, but then I moved to cabins and an adobe house. I used to drool about earth ships. Now I don't think I want to live inside of a tire structure. And then I found your company, Geoship, and was just blown away by the whole concept and how it's all ceramic, including the frame. So yeah, excited to talk about all that. But before we jump in, how did you get interested in geodesic domes in this whole area?
I kind of left my career when I was like 24 and started traveling, and was laying on a beach in Portugal one day and just had this experience where I stood up and I felt really light, and the synchronicities were powerful. It felt like an altered state. It was an altered state of consciousness without any, you know, drugs, basically. So that really put me on like, wow, how is this happening? And are other people just like operating that way all the time? So I started doing first thing I did after that experience was like a long Vipassana meditation retreat, and then started probing into started then getting into the plant medicines a little bit to like try to just probe into that experience a little bit, like recreate it, and then start to maybe learn how to integrate it into life. And so that put me on a trajectory of like, I just wanted to build myself a small cabin in nature and like learn to be an artist. I wanted it to be a space that kind of replicates like, stone circles, basically. Like because clearly when you're like meditating in nature, when your butt is on the ground and you've got light coming from all directions and there's fresh air, it just is better than sitting inside, or at least sitting inside the structures that I had experienced previously. But I couldn't afford land, and building was a pain in the butt. So I ended up restoring a classic wooden sailboat and kind of cruised around the Pacific for about 6 years. And also on the sailboat, you kind of experience these it's like a certain, everything, the wind vane and the sails all kind of come into resonance basically with like the wind and the waves. And there's this feeling of kind of feeling more connected to the natural world. And Geoship came out of that, kind of research, and not only the physical structure, but I also realized in that following that thread was like also obviously, the nature of your relationships and how aligned you feel with what you're on your path, your purpose. So yeah, I ended up in Iceland for a couple of years working with WikiLeaks. I,
Wow.
met Julian Assange, ended up in Iceland, and basically I then started building a house with my brother. The experience in Iceland was essentially like new forms of currency and democracy, and feeling how there were so many people in Iceland at that point. It was like 2011 that were really aligned on this like evolutionary purpose, like they're doing something important for the future of humanity. And that created that feeling to an extent, right? So the bioceramic geodesic dome is really, I feel, the kind of maximum efficiency in terms of like materials, geometry, and method of manufacturing. So we're using these kind of next level materials that enable like injection molding of ceramic components. And so there's a lot of sustainability and affordability and resilience benefits. And as I got into that kind of model of ceramic geodesic domes, I started to realize that there are these health benefits as well, and that it's an economic engine to basically help people connect more with their purpose and their community, and to have healthy relationships with like the ecosystems around us and our communities. So it's kind of like a full package in that sense, all geared towards what's the right word for it, but like flow state is maybe a word. Like how do we get ourselves into a more consistent flow?
I love it. And you mentioned affordability. I think when we connected, I told you I was considering extending out my cabin only 40 to 50 feet. And the company quoted me like 1.5 million. And this is just a wood structure, which is just insane. And this is in North Idaho, where it's generally a little less expensive to live up here. And so when I saw your Geoship, I mean, you guys are shooting for how much per square foot for the build?
Initially, it'll be around $200 a square foot. And then at scale, I think we can get down to about $100 a square foot.
Wow. That's wild. For the quality of the house you're going to get. I mean, with cabins, I've dealt with bugs infiltrating just because it's not tight. There's mold potential in pretty much every type of housing, right? What makes Geoship different with the mold? Because you guys have on the website mold proof. Is that just the properties of the ceramic?
Yeah. So the material is a chemically bonded ceramic, it's kind of a new family of materials that were really developed at U.S. national labs in there's about a 12-year R&D project led by the nuclear industry in like the mid 90s to early 2000s. And so the material it's a ceramic in that it's crystalline, highly crystalline with covalent and ionic bonding, but it's chemically bonded, which means it doesn't require high temperature. It's basically like a cement, but it's a really rapid reaction. So we can, in a manufacturing environment, we can demold very quickly.
Right.
And it also has some of the properties of a polymer in that it forms molecular bonds with like wood and with metal and with itself. So, gosh, I just kind of lost what your core question was. I think I went on a little bit of a tangent there.
Oh yeah, I was just asking about mold and what makes the ceramic different from other structures.
Yeah, so I was explaining that because it's highly crystalline, so there's not pores. Like it's like 1 or 2% porosity versus normal cement is like 10 or 20% porosity. So there's not pores for the dirt to sit in, for mold to grow out of. And obviously, mold doesn't support mold growth. There's nothing for the mold to eat on the ceramic, and there's not much pores for the dirt to collect in for mold to grow. And it actually has a natural, like one of the applications for it is that it's being used on hospital floors for like a antiviral effect that it naturally has, right? So it just is, mold proof probably isn't the right word. The material itself is mold proof. The house isn't mold proof because mold could grow on the couch or, in something that's in the drawer, but it's not going to grow on the structure itself.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's a big deal that I think if someone's outside of the natural health community, they're not hip to this whole mold toxicity problem. I've had friends that had to throw out or donate all their belongings and live in a camper or live in a tent just to heal from living in a moldy apartment or a moldy home. Supposedly with apartments, I've been hearing that's a big deal. Like landlords just don't care. They're just like, just give me rent and live in your moldy apartment. Seems to be the story in a lot of the cases.
Yeah, exactly. And part of just to be clear on the Geoship solution, the frame is a ceramic composite, and it is not, it's not just ceramic, it's always a ceramic composite. So it's a combination of ceramic and like some kind of fibers, like using basalt fiber and hemp fiber and the interior panels. So the frame, the exterior, and the interior are all ceramic composites, and the insulation material is also cellular ceramic. So we entrain the ceramic with air and fill the whole cavity with the cellular ceramic insulation. So there's really nothing in the structure for mold to grow on.
Wow. Is that cellular ceramic, like the insulation, is that a new invention? Or?
Like entraining different cementitious materials with air is not a new invention. And then we're just kind of optimize the surfactant that's used to work with the chemistry of the ceramic. And then also just like the tooling to, entrain the air with the material is sort of a new invention. I mean, there's no one out there right now that's making a cellular ceramic insulation, except actually like Aircrete with a K, krete.com is, I think, doing a magnesium oxychloride cellular ceramic insulation.
It's interesting that you were talking about the porosity and how the Geoship material is 1 to 2% and normal cement's 10 to 20%. And on the website, you say natural air exchange. So is that 1 to 2% enough for it to breathe and to allow in fresh air, or where does that come in, the natural air exchange point?
No, the air exchange is through ventilation systems and opening windows, right? So it's also engineered to have a really tight envelope so that you have efficiency. Like the R value is actually not even as important as like air infiltration. And it's important to differentiate between, like, sometimes the word breathing walls is used not because air can pass through, but because water vapor can pass through, kind of like Gore-Tex, right? Like it doesn't allow water or air to pass through, but water vapor is smaller, and it through a charge differential in the material, it actually draws water vapor through. And that's part of our design goal too.
Oh, that's fascinating.
If water were to somehow get into the cavity of the home, it could pass through and dry out.
That's cool. I don't know if you're going to have other customers doing this, but before we hit record, I mentioned to you I'm putting this on top of a 4,500 square foot bunker. I think I'm getting mine in 2026 if all goes well. And What I didn't tell you is I'd like to use that as like a geothermal mass because it was in the mid 90s the last couple of weeks and I was down underground, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60 feet. And even if with it's kind of demoed, kids partied in it for the last 20 years, there's a lot of openings. It was still a constant like mid 70s Fahrenheit and it's being 90s outside. So my idea is to kind of pump that underground air up into the dome with like a fan, which should be pretty efficient.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Yep. So let's see. Where else can we go with this? Fire resilient is another big one. Going back to cabins, I think people have, like, especially on social media, I noticed this kind of fantasizing about off-grid living and homesteading and living in the woods off-grid, which, you know, I've done the 4-year off-grid thing and it's no joke. It's a good skill to have, but is it ideal? I don't think so. Well, the grid's here, but the whole fire aspect. I mean, I've had some scary summers up here in North Idaho. Like right now, I mean, if you look at a map of the Pacific Northwest, I don't know if you've seen it, Morgan, with all the little fire all over Oregon and Washington and Idaho. And we're basically living in these kindling buildings if you're living in the mountains. So that was a huge selling point to me of Geoship is that fire resiliency.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we're in Nevada City, which is kind of like fire country as well. And of course, you know, the ceramic material it's actually another application is used for commonly is like as a refractory material. So it's actually fire resistant to like 2200 degrees Fahrenheit. And I think we'll be doing some demos next year of that in, you know, Nevada City.
Bring out the flamethrower.
Yep.
That's awesome. I wonder how hot it gets if you're in the middle of a forest fire. Probably up in the thousands, right?
Yeah, I think the kind of tornado fires can get up to around 2000 degrees.
Wow.
But, you know, usually wouldn't have a tornado fire like that has a lot to do with how well, you know, part of fire resistivity is like the ecology of the space around the home, right? So it's not like you're building in the middle of a bunch of trees, so you have a 2000 degree tornado fire whipping through the house.
Yeah, ideally, like up here, we build fire breaks, and logging is a big part of mountain living. Which, if you're raised on Fern Gully, people usually get up in arms, you know, with cutting down trees. But it's so important for reducing bugs and I mean, everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the way a lot of fires start around here or houses catch on fire around here is like some sparks from the fire catch the deck on fire or catch the roof on fire and then the home burns. And definitely don't have that with the ceramic dome. There's nothing to combust.
And even the windows, will those be, can you get ones that are resilient up to a high temperature?
Yeah, but the sealant between the window, you know, that seals the window in might not be resistant to high temperature. So if there's really like somehow a 2000 degree tornado fire that goes across the home, probably you're replacing the windows.
That's when I go underground in my bunker. Yeah. I did want to touch on EMFs. I feel like mold and EMFs are a big focus for good reason. They're big issues. And the last time we chatted, you were talking about the dielectric potential of the panels. And I think before you hit record, you were saying it's not like proven yet, but you'll be doing some research on that and experiments.
Yeah, well, I think so. Some things have been demonstrated, you know, like this material. There's I said it was developed by the nuclear industry. So what their initial goal was to basically imagine they have like a barrel of nuclear sludge, right? And they add this ceramic material in there and mix it all up and it becomes a pellet so that then it could be handled and stored in a mountain basically for long-term permanent storage. So it was developed, you know, for the Hanford plant up in Washington where they have still the world's biggest environmental cleanup project, I think, from the atomic bomb development. And during that project, they also realized that the material has radiation shielding properties. So when you there's certain aggregates that need to be added in pretty low quantities, like metal aggregates, that give the material the ability to shield gamma and neutron radiation. So there is the potential for like radiation shielding at that point. But where we're really focusing our research is not on shielding radiation, but how do we actually like create a space that is the opposite of radiation. And that kind of gets into the core of what I think is like some of these ancient, like the biogeometry out of Egypt and the ancient kind of Vastu Shastra in India. And it's all kind of the science of how to create structures that kind of have an energetic quality that feels good. And I think a nice way to understand that, what we're going for there is, if you think of radiation as like charge radiating outwards, it's like charge that's leaking out from the center. And what's the opposite of that is charge that's holding into itself, or centripetal. So the whole thing with, I think, the science of kind of sacred architecture, or I think what will be a new definition of success in home building, is that you want materials that have a high dielectric constant. So they're not conductive and they're not insulative, they're high dielectric. So that means just like the capacitors or electronic devices, they generate an internal charge field. And these ceramic materials have a high dielectric constant. And then you want geometry that focuses that charge into the center, right? It's like fractal. It's creating this centripetal charge. It's basically like a charge accumulator. And we suspect that like the way you'll tell how well architects do in the future is like you put a plant in the space, you see how well it grows, you measure the rate of seed germination, you take a picture with a GDV camera or biophotonic camera, and you see, the efficiency of charge distribution in the space, which is kind of the opposite of radiation. And there's Dr. Ibrahim Karim is on our advisory and doing some really interesting work there, and just like kind of measuring the effects of biogeometry, or basically how certain shapes and geometries, shapes and materials and combinations of shapes and materials in the built environment can kind of create this harmonic, feeling. I mean, it's kind of like a stone circle or a pyramid, right? Fire in middle. It's like focusing that energy into the center. Same with the stone circle, I think.
I was going to ask you your thoughts on pyramids. Years ago, I read the book. I think it was Nick Edwards wrote Pyramid Power, and Patrick Flanagan was really into pyramids too. And I ended up ordering one from Nick before he passed. And it was basically gold-plated arrow shafts into a Nubian pyramid. So I believe it was like 72 degrees, and came with a little compass where you align the base with north, true north. And I would meditate in there, wear like an ultrasonic brain device, do crazy experiments. But it always felt so good being inside of it. And that was, mostly just the shape. And I have a geodesic dome down there from Colorado, Growing Spaces company. It's my greenhouse. And just being in that shape without the ceramic, because you mentioned there's shapes and then there's materials, and you could have one or the other or both. And I feel like you guys marrying both of those together, I can't imagine how good it feels being in a Geoship.
Yeah, we don't even call it a prototype, like demo dome that we built here in Nevada City. It's about an 18-foot diameter structure. And, you sit in it and it does feel good, right? It literally, like, I'm kind of a dancer. Like, I just like to dance and move my body. And when you're in there and you just feel more, it's like a feeling of being centered and balanced, which obviously that's kind of what all the energy wants to do that in there. It's like this, it's creating this sweet spot in the center. You can hear it, acoustically. You create wall panels and furniture and stuff that basically absorbs that. So it's like a perfect silent echo. But I think the E energy, right? The longitudinal electromagnetic waves, similar to sound energy. So like where the sound wants to have a sweet spot is also where the chi wants to have a sweet spot. And this is totally getting into like the woo, like, I wanted to just preface that like these are kind of theories, hypotheses that we're really excited to like delve into as like a deeper level of, health benefits through architecture, is this whole materials and geometry creating sort of the opposite of radiation. But then there's the basic stuff, like these materials are bioceramics technically. So the chemical composition, like potassium, magnesium, calcium, phosphate, really similar to the chemical composition of human bone. And the structure, the geodesic is the flower of life in 3D. Like if you make a circle around these domes and connect the hubs as you go up, you basically have a golden ratio spiral, right? And this is, how energy kind of wants to move theoretically, like why these ancient structures and stuff are based on the golden ratio. So you have basically bone material in the flower of life geometry. So it's 100% like non-toxic. We're not using petrochemicals. There might be a few petrochemicals and like how the windows attach to the structure initially, but no VOCs. And eventually we'll figure out ways to get rid of that as well. But in the material itself, it's definitely 100% non-toxic and nothing for mold to grow on. And then I think also this, just like the floors, will different floor systems can be put in it, but what really the basic floor will be a poured ceramic floor over an earthen. So it's like you're earthing when you're inside the space. Cool. And having light come in from different directions, like you can see in all directions, and those windows can be tuned.
That's cool. I don't know if I sell earthing sheets, and I've been doing it since 2010. It was one of the first things back in my raw vegan days that I discovered, and grounding raw to earth just feels so amazing in most environments. Like sometimes in a big city, it's not even to the earth. There's going to be a lot of energy in the ground you don't want to pick up.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of stray current, stray voltage and stuff, but that's awesome. And you can connect them too, right? So depending on how much space you want, what you plan to do. I know you guys are kind of promoting like the community type. If someone wants to build a community on some mountain, they could basically put a bunch of these up and connect them how they want.
Yeah. The kind of our initial product is a 36-foot interior diameter, 2-bedroom, 2-bath. It's a total of about 1,600 square feet, and will be certified through like the California factory built housing program, right? So it's you don't technically, if you're in California, and eventually we'll extend this to other states. All states have some version of a factory built housing program, and it basically means that like you don't need electricians and plumbers and specialty people on site. It's just like designed for one crew of maybe 3 to 6 people to install the dome. And initially we're aiming for about 4 weeks, and then eventually 2 weeks or less.
That was the incredible part. Yeah, because even to do an addition on your house, it could be a couple of years, I've heard up here, firsthand accounts. So just to have it up and running in even a month or 2 months is crazy. And that's interior included too, right?
Yeah, including all the electrical, mechanical systems and
furniture,
like move-in ready.
Wow.
Except the foundation. So that's like once the site is prepped and the utilities are run to the pad, I'm talking about 2 to 4 weeks for the construction of the home and all the countertops and interior walls and doors and everything. So like move-in ready.
I did have a question, like on the website, when you go to the Geoship site on the top, you guys have a nice scrolling like carousel of pictures, and one of them is the kitchen. And I had a friend make a good point. He said it's going to be tricky to like furnish it because if you want to go along the walls, you can't go to Home Depot and buy like an oval curved island or something like that. Or so I'm guessing you guys will probably create the market for that, or maybe it already exists.
Yeah, I mean, so our product will come with the countertops and the kitchen island and stuff all kind of designed for it, and is part of the product. And then also, our ultimate goal is to or one of our ultimate goals to run Home Depot out of business.
Okay.
Right. So you get an owner's manual with your home, and you're able to do a lot of the repairs and you can. What's interesting about the ceramic material is we're designing for a 500-year life, or a multi-generational life, 500 years, 300 years, 400 years, 500 years, multi-generational life. And one of the things that enables that is that the dome can be repaired and resurfaced with the same material it's made from. Right. So you can spray the material and resurface it, and it's renewing it, right? Or being able to repair it basically yourself.
Wow. That's incredible. I wonder if I could use that in my bunker, just put it over the cement to patch it up or something.
Yeah, you totally could. It's another, this material is used by some of the DOTs for like bridge deck repair. It's kind of like the best concrete repair material in the world. You can, that bonding ability that I mentioned earlier, you can coat concrete with it and repair.
Not to go back to the esoteric, but I did want to ask you your thoughts on the difference between the pyramid and the dome, because it seems like they're both concentrating chi. Like you said, pyramid meets fire in the middle. Do you think it's the same end result, or do you think they're different? Like to me, the pyramid feels just intuitively more like yang, and the dome maybe more yin. But I'm curious your perspective on it.
I don't know. I think that
Okay.
they're both doing the same thing in terms of like concentrating the energy, and you can hear it through the sound in the center. And I feel like the geodesic is definitely like I think the first person who really defined the geodesic dome was like Plato 2,500 years ago, and he defined this like 120 right triangles coming together into a sphere, and it was interesting because all of the platonic solids kind of nest within it so that their lines touch its lines, and he called it Gaia, right? Like an invisible vibrating container for becoming. And some people would say that the ley lines that encircle the earth are basically creating a geodesic pattern. I feel like the pattern of the dome, of the geodesic dome specifically, is really connected to the earth. And that's how it feels. And so it doesn't feel like spacey kind of yang, energy, but it feels really grounding, and like you're settling into something that is really resonance with the earth.
And hurricane resilient too, right? I forgot to mention that. If you're in, where would it be, the Midwest? I don't know. I've never dealt with a hurricane.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, they're aerodynamic. There's a lot of hurricanes passing over, and the only thing left standing is the dome in one way or another.
Wow. That's super cool. And it was really after Plato, the next guy was really Buckminster Fuller to bring this out, right? And elaborate on it.
I think definitely popularizing it and creating the math behind it so that we could like build them, right? Was definitely Bucky. I think there's some, some observatories in Germany that were maybe geodesic looking or were geodesic, but Bucky really he got the patent for it and wrote the synergetic math, which is this whole system of like how to construct geodesic domes.
And imagine after he did that, people just started building them on their land, but it was mainly wood and metal. I think I've looked into companies that do it, and they look, I mean, yours look the best by far of any geodesic dome company that's out there. Just looks more aesthetically pleasing. I've seen in person ones with just wood panels, and I'd almost just rather have a cabin at that point.
Yeah, I think some people think, well, the geodesic domes were invented in the 60s, and there was that whole kind of back to the land movement, and everyone tried to build them, and a lot of the hippies who were trying to build them for so long have also like written books on how terrible they are, right? Or the experience of building them is terrible. Because I think Bucky summed it up really well when he said, what we're building now, like these domes that we've been building all through the 70s and 80s, are wooden spaceships, right? It's like it's the right form, but it's the wrong material. And he is said to have predicted that it would be like 50 to 100 years until the material science would catch up and enable, mass manufacturing of geodesic domes. And that's really common with a lot of really revolutionary, technologies, is that it requires the material science to kind of catch up and enable the thing to be built efficiently. And for sure, a lot of the early problems with geodesic domes when they're building out of metal and wood and is, you're using stock material, so you end up cutting all these irregular triangles, and it creates a lot of waste. And getting it all to like seal together and whatnot is challenging when you're trying to put rectangular shingles on a sphere, and it makes it look kind of ugly too in a lot of ways. And I think our ceramic geodesic domes, they really look like that we're able to kind of honor the beauty of the geometry by not messing it up with like square windows and square shingles and things like that. So I think it really shines through.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you could choose where you want, how many windows you want and where you want them, right? Which is like kind of
Yeah.
unlimited potential, right? The lighting.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, I think we have about a 43% glass to floor area ratio in the alpha, we call it alpha dome. So the one that's being installed are being engineered now and will be installed in like beginning of next year, very early beginning of next year,
Cool.
that's like 2 or 3 times more than conventional housing. It's usually like 10 or 20% is the glass to floor area ratio. We're at like 40%, and still having the levels of energy efficiency that we need in it.
Wow. So if I understand correctly, you guys are building, is it 10 in Northern California by next year? Is that kind of your ramp up? And then then the 2026, even more?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the challenges with what we're doing is that it's not just like Tesla was just, you just have to scale manufacturing, right? But with what we're doing, you have to scale manufacturing and regulatory and installations. So it's a pretty complex, like operational business. So basically, the hockey stick looks a little, more drawn out. So we're looking at like to 10 domes next year and 10 to 20 domes the year after that, and then like 100 domes, and then like 1,000 domes and 10,000 domes and 100,000 domes. And our ultimate goal, like our Earth shot, is to make the best home on Earth, the most affordable home on Earth, and scale manufacturing to like a million domes a year by 2035. So the hockey stick happens. It just happens a little further out.
That's cool. Yeah, the regulatory is interesting because I put up just a greenhouse in California last year, a geodesic dome greenhouse. And some of the neighbors were throwing a fit. It's Southern California. People tend to be a little more on edge. I don't know if it's the heat or just the population density. So I can imagine, more of these houses going up. From what you're seeing with the regulation aspect of it, does it seem like a lot of hurdles, or does it depend on the state?
No, it depends on, like what you're describing there is kind of like an HOA, basically, where you're just not allowed, like if a lot of time there's about 30% of the neighborhoods in the US are under an HOA, and part of those HOA regulations might be that you can't like put something there that looks so different, right? The roof lines have to be kind of similar. Here in Nevada City, like we can't build in downtown, the city center of Nevada City, because they want this like mining aesthetic, right? And all the houses and everything has got to kind of look like that. But that's only, a pretty small percentage of the land that's available in the US. And especially that is our approach is to build new communities, right? So we're like building communities, not trying to do infill where you're infilling in an existing community with something. So definitely when you're building new communities, there's really no regulations on like HOAs and aesthetics.
Yeah. Yeah. This would look out of place in like established neighborhood with just cookie cutter square homes everywhere.
Yeah. And we're seeing a lot of, all the federal, state, local governments all want to see, affordable, climate resilient housing and low carbon, affordable, climate resilient housing. And it's like we're hitting on all those things. And there's nothing in the building codes that says, you have to build a rectilinear structure. It's just, it needs to be, go through the right structural engineering processes. So
are there like
this is and I think also a lot of the building codes, they're basically concerned mostly about strength and safety. And we just like check those boxes really well. It's resilient and strong.
Definitely. Are there incentives for you guys? Like I know like electric car startups like Aptera, I think you guys are aware of, got a California grant or something. Are there things like that for environmentally friendly structures like you're building?
Yeah, there's a lot. For as we scale up the manufacturing, there's kind of low interest loans and grants available for that. And there's also a lot of grants and loans available for the communities that are built.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, full disclosure to listeners, I didn't say this at the beginning, but I did invest in Geoship, and I'm excited to have one up here in Idaho at some point. And you guys are still accepting investors, right?
No, we just closed our initial kind of seed one round, and we'll be reopening though pretty soon here in the next month, and it'll be open to retail investors through a platform, so people could invest like as little as I think $200 or $300 and get shares.
Oh, cool. Is there going to be a way for them to lock in a dome if they hit a certain number, or have you figured that out yet?
Yeah, basically the investors will be above the regular reservation holders in like the queue, So
Mhm.
we're also launching a new website in the next couple of weeks here that will have a reservation. You'll be able to make a reservation for like $100 non-refund or $100 refundable reservation deposit.
Cool. And I don't think we talked about the process. So if someone, I guess it's going to be a year and a half, or 2 years from now, when someone gets one of these, my understanding, you kind of truck in the finished panels that were made in the factory. Is that correct?
Yep, everything basically arrives in a shipping container and it's assembled on site by initially our crew and then eventually crews we train, and potentially I think at some point in the future it would be like owner builders ideally with who are able to use some maybe augmented reality glasses to have the instructions or support they need to build it themselves.
Yeah, that's a super good application. I know those are demonized as being evil, like the Apple Vision Pro and stuff, but I think it has application for things exactly like this, because you could pretty much physically or virtually see in real, like you said, AR, augmented reality, what it's going to look like on the land, which is
Yeah,
pretty
and the
awesome.
parts, like just in the actual assembly process, the parts can kind of like light up and show
Yeah.
you what connects to what, and you could even have a helper in the glass to ask questions and kind of guide you as you're doing it. So it's a great in fact, I think one of the initial applications of AR was like Boeing engineers putting engines together, and similarly, right, to have these glasses on that shows them, basically helps follow the instructions.
That's super awesome. Wow. Well, yeah, and one thing I want to mention too, if you connect the domes, I think I did a virtual walkthrough, and you can't even tell, like it's like seamless, right? You would think it would look like you're walking in between two domes, but is it like an optical illusion or something? Because in the virtual tour, it just looks like it's a connected hallway or something. But
Yeah, it's just
it's
the connector between the domes could be different lengths, and the shortest one is, only a foot or two,
wow.
and then you're kind of the space is pretty big too that you're walking through, so it just feels like they're kind of one.
Is the 36 dome the biggest that you guys will make for a while, or do you have plans on going bigger?
It'll really depend on what kind of feedback we get from people who've made reservations, like how much demand is there for different size domes. But initially our kind of sequencing is like 36-foot dome and then the connector to put two 36-foot domes together. And at that point you have, over 3,000 square feet of living space. And then the next product would be the 20-foot dome that is a great like kind of art studio or writing studio, and you can connect that to a big dome or connect two or three of them to a big dome to kind of give you the like 2,000 square foot, 1,900 square foot kind of size range. So then you think of the different constellations that you can create between those two dome sizes and how they connect, and there's a lot of potential.
That's awesome. Yeah, I always crave more square footage, but when you start to think about the cleaning and maintenance of all that space, there's a sweet spot to hit, right? Not having way too much to manage.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said too for like having spaces that are just not all one space, but it's kind of like an ADU, right? You just have an auxiliary dwelling.
Yeah.
We looked at it from first principles in terms of geometry, materials, and method of manufacturing. I think when you really bring home building down to the fundamentals, those are the key things. And I think we've optimized the geometry and the materials, and the method of manufacturing we're using is formative manufacturing, right? So we're casting or molding components versus like additive or subtractive manufacturing. So I think at a really fundamental level, this is a very scalable and sustainable, affordable solution. And ultimately, one of the exciting parts of it is that it can be highly automated. So in the factory,
Yeah.
it evolves into probably being what Elon Musk would call like alien dreadnought manufacturing, where it's just like materials come in one end and panels come out the other, and there's not a lot of requirement for like humans to be in there doing a repetitive job. That said, early on, it's all about the humans and like creating a space that is really augments the people and having to eventually automate. And the same with the installation process. I mean, it's designed for, we don't require like most factory built housing solutions, or they're building a module in a factory and then you set the module on site with a crane. Whereas this is designed for humans to build, and eventually those humans could easily be, humanoid drones that are building the structures. And of course, they'd be probably better at it than any human in terms of like strength and accuracy and just repeating the same thing over and over. You're basically, even though the window configurations can change and the colors and textures, kind of the, cabinet doors and main doors and colors and textures inside, and the flooring might all change. So it gives you a lot of different looks, but the assembly process is really pretty much the same, and this is kind of what we're like. Our CTO and head of manufacturing both were coming out of Tesla, and they were both leaders in the early days at Tesla. And the way that we think about the construction of the home is, we don't even call it construction, we call it installation. And it's really like trying to bring, it's almost like in a car plant, you do the general assembly in the factory. And we kind of think of like the on-site installation as like the general assembly process that would normally happen in a car factory. So you're trying to like minimize the number of decisions that have to be made, and getting really good tooling and stuff, so that require a lot of thinking or like intuition on site. And that obviously really well with humanoid drones at some point too.
It's cool. Yeah, I've watched a lot of builders on the land, and like half the time is often spent like staring at the project and, okay, how do we figure this out? Instead of taking action. At least 50% of the energy can go to that. So.
Totally.
So I thought the AR would definitely speed it up if someone can't figure it out. Okay, throw these on. Oh, now I get it. This goes there, and that's how I connect that. Super cool, Morgan. Yeah, I really appreciate what you're doing and sharing with the world. It's the next few years are super exciting. I know this year has been scary with all the world events, and now there's like riots in the UK, and just everything seems to be always falling. But I like to stay optimistic and just stay future, stay in the present, but also just kind of look forward into the future and what's possible. How can we make things more efficient? And to me, that's what Geoship represents as far as a living situation. So I can't wait to have my own. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Matt. Really, that's a lot of what we're, feel like technology like this, especially when it's combined with business models and a corporate structure that is like purpose, before profits, can be so powerful in terms of like helping us just create the future that we imagine for ourselves and kids and grandkids.
It's awesome. Well, you guys are on Instagram. If you guys want to check them out, a lot of great pictures on there, Geoship. And then the website's geoship.is. And I think you guys have a few YouTube videos up, hopefully more soon.
Yeah,
on everything.
There'll be a lot more coming out soon. We kind of raised an initial round of capital a few years ago and shut down the marketing, and so that we could just focus on the R&D and product development. And now we're kind of relaunching, in a sense, in terms of opening new website and opening reservations and raising a round of capital.
Awesome. Well, yeah, if you guys want to keep up to date, definitely put in your email on the top and click the sign up button. It's probably the best, right, to get updates on stuff.
Yep.
Perfect. Right on. Well, yeah, thanks, Morgan. Stick around. We closed out the show. Thanks so much. Well, I hope this show inspired you to look into geodesic domes and maybe even consider living inside one at some point. The website is geoship.is. if you want to read about it and see pictures of what they look like. Like I said, my future home will be really interesting with a geodesic dome on top, a huge underground bunker underneath, and then actually a pyramid right next to the dome. I'm working on making the capstone to complete a giant underground pyramid that's already attached to the bunker. So I'm really excited to live in the shape of a pyramid and also a dome. And I'll report back if I feel a big difference between the two structures. My website is matt-blackburn.com. In the next few months, the website should be updated and overhauled and a lot nicer, easier to navigate. But for now, you can find the CLF protocol on there. And then under the shop tab, you can see all of my recommended products that I've found over the last 3 to 4 years. I want to give a shout out highlight to Masa chips. They've been very busy coming out with all sorts of different flavors of their seed oil free tallow tortilla chips. So now they have blue chips, they have churro flavor, habanero flavor, and lime. And they actually just launched in the last month or so potato chips. So I was raised on Lay's chips. I don't even want to think of how many pounds of Lay's chips I consumed growing up. But they kind of carried over the same idea of seed oil free. So instead of canola oil, the chips are cooked in beef tallow. And I've been very impressed. I've actually experimented with eating a whole bag in one sitting on one of my busy days when I didn't have time to sit down and have a full meal and I was just on the go. And I actually felt great. I combined it with some venison jerky and I felt really energized. My stomach didn't feel nauseous from eating a whole bag of chips. I'm not an affiliate for that company, but if you want to check them out, you can go to Vandy Crisps. It's VANDY crisps.com. And they are delicious. So I highly recommend them. Again, no affiliation, just sharing it because they're friends of mine. I appreciate them innovating in that space where there's a huge gap in the market and a need for chips like what they're creating. My brand is Mitolife. You can find that at mitolife.co. And there's still a couple weeks left to enter to win a free 7-stage water filtration unit. This is a filter that I didn't private label from a water trade show. It was built completely from scratch. It took a couple years for my friends and I to put this together. And we're offering up one for free if you buy Mitolife products. So each dollar that you spend gives you essentially a raffle ticket. And the more you spend, the higher chance you have of winning that 7-stage under-counter water filter. I've been getting slammed with messages about when our shower filter is going to come back. That's under the water tab on the website. It's the KDF shower solution. That will be back either by the posting of this show or by the following Monday. So if you guys have been waiting for that, highly recommend jumping on the site and grabbing it immediately because the last batch sold out very quickly. People are loving that shower filter. Then, of course, we have various supplements, a lot of sales going on right now. If you've been curious to try a lot of the products, I've been upping my beef liver consumption. A lot of people don't realize that's a great source of iron and vitamin A. I actually have several gene mutations where I can't convert plant beta carotene sourced vitamin A into retinol. So I have a higher vitamin A requirement because of that. Maybe that's why I feel awesome taking tons of Rosita cod liver oil every winter. But throughout the year, I take the beef liver, and it also has some iron and some copper in there. which are really good if you have a past of veganism and vegetarianism like me. Even if you're a man, if you didn't get a lot of animal products in for the first several decades of your life, you probably need some iron unless you have hereditary hemochromatosis and the iron storage genes. And of course, it's always great to test. Serum ferritin is an accurate marker for iron status, as I've talked about ad nauseum in my show, kind of unlearning what I've been regurgitating from a cult-like mentality for several years. Serum ferritin is absolutely accurate to see how much iron you have stored in your tissues. And for me, I've never been able to get above 100. And so I am not afraid of getting iron. It's not just a dumb waiter that carries oxygen. It is a master nutrient that is essential to have energy and zest for life. Iron is incredible for your health. Don't believe the people that are demonizing it. Oyster also goes well with the beef liver, and that's currently on sale, the desiccated oyster. Of course, we're coming now into winter. I am really excited for oyster season. I make a maiden voyage. It's quite the drive for me to go and get high quality oysters, but I make it worth it. I slam down a dozen raw oysters at a time. I'm up here in North Idaho, and they are the best oysters I've ever had. I was in San Diego, California, SoCal for 30 years, and the oysters down there don't hold a candle, in my opinion, to the oysters up here. So my strategy when oysters are out of season, like they've been, I consume the desiccated oyster. And then when they're back in season, I aim to consume a dozen every single week. So that's all for today. Check out my page on Instagram. I post daily. I have a daily coffee facts. Lately, I've been talking about the benefits of fluoride in your toothpaste, where I pour my espresso, make my cream and maple syrup concoction, and I put a little health fact there on my Instagram story. So that's Matt Blackburn. Mitolife page is under Mitolife on Instagram. We're on YouTube under Mitolife Official. And I'll see you guys next Friday. Stay supercharged.